I think most of you know me. My name is Dr. and I'm president of the Santa Fe World Affairs Forum, and would like to welcome you to our program today with Dr. Gary Grossman, a professor emeritus now at Arizona State University, who a number of you, I think, heard at the symposium in April. And we thought he was so good. We said, well, we'd like to have him back. So we really appreciate Gary coming. Just the usual reminders, leave us your name tags when when you leave. A different reminder, lunch is out, will be out in the, by the bio wall. And it will be buffet, and the caterers will be coming, and they'll have food out there by the time we finish. This time, given this room situation here, as opposed to being in the boardroom, as you can tell, we're starting the program. We'll do the formal program here, and then go out and have lunch at at the tables. So welcome everybody. We're delighted to have you. As I said, I'll be turning this over to Gary very shortly. There are a couple of flyers out on the table that one is lists programs that we've had so far, and then also goes on to programs that we have ones in the future, at least for the next couple of months. And please pick them up with you. We'll try to get that up on the website. I think that's it. I could go on. I could read you Gary's bio. I think I won't. I think everybody in this room reads very well. So you don't need to hear it from me. Just to say, on a personal note, Gary and I went to the same undergraduate college, and we met through an alumni relationship. And so that's the connection. And we started talking about things Middle East and things Turkey. And I discovered that he knew a lot about it, and a lot more than I did. And I thought would be a very good speaker for us to have here at the lunch. And many thanks to Krista for being at the console and helping, and will be helping with Gary's slides. And Gary will be the reason we've asked people to sit this. Yeah, come on forward, is that we do not have mics in this room, but it is a small enough room. And Gary wants to be able to do this program as interactive as possible. And so it makes it easier for him if we just let him do it that way. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. I think, I'll tell you what I'm doing here. All right, typically, or people speaking are the entertainment. And I talk, you listen at a certain point at the end when there's no more time. Questions, okay? And I decided I didn't want to do it that way, and I'll tell you why. It's selfish. And that is that what I'm talking about today, and what I talked about last night in Albuquerque, is stuff that I'm working on right now. Now, the title Professor Emeritus, what that means, I just retired in May. And what universities do is, if they want to keep you around for any reason, but they don't want to pay you anymore, they give you this title, which entitles me to throw around the name Arizona State University, and do stuff for them, with them, and so forth. But they can't tell me what to do because they don't pay me anymore. So what I'm doing is working on a book. And I'm working on a book that concerns Turkey's second century. If those of you who know about Turkey, it became a republic in the ruins of the Ottoman Empire in October 29th, 1923. All right, we just passed October 29th, 2023. So we are into the second century of the Turkish Republic. All right, so what I'm doing in this book is sort of assessing what has happened over the first century, and then beginning to think in terms of the future. What could Turkey be? And where issues might arise. Now, the one part of that is Turkey expressing itself in the international community. All right, it came, again, sure the history of the post-World War II era. Turkey chose the wrong side, you might say, in World War I, and suffered very much as a consequence. Now, it had been declining since 1683, where the Ottomans were defeated at the gates of Vienna. All right, and for some reason, it served the interests of other players that just doesn't go away all of a sudden, Brits most particularly. It just didn't blow away, but there was value to keeping it going because they didn't want to get the Arab states all inflamed. All right, so it was strategic, and the Brits referred to the Ottoman Empire as the sick man of Europe, the sick man of Europe. And so it was they perceived it as very good for them to allow the Ottoman Empire to be sick. But eventually, and I think probably, do you think you're going to use that chair?
No.
Okay. What I think I want to do is I want to have a conversation with you about these ideas, because as I say, I'm just shaping them up. And the more input you can give me, or the sort of the reaction that you give me, will be very valuable to me. And so as a consequence, I don't want to hold the questions at the end. If you have questions or comments, I want them now. And so if there's a weak point in my argument, or if there's not enough information, or whatever it is you see, I want to hear about it. Okay? Is that fair? All right. Insofar as we have a little bit of intimate group, I have introduced myself. I wonder if each of you could say just a sentence or two about who you are, why you're here, what do you do when you don't come to fun places like this, and so forth.
My name is Randall Sword. I'm a retired physician. I come to these fairs because I want to continue learning. I'm interested in
Outstanding.
foreign affairs.
Great.
My name is Elliot Stern,
Elliot.
also retired, still active in some things, but very interested in foreign policy and world
Great.
relations.
Sure.
Judy Williams, also retired, majored in international relations in college and became a health policy person in my career, and have traveled a lot. I've been to Turkey a couple of times. I'm interested in the area, and I do with the League of Women Voters in Santa Fe County, Kansas State, New Mexico. So in my spare time.
Hi, I'm Dan Fallon. I am Professor Emeritus of Psychology and Public Policy at the University of Maryland, where I also served as provost and academic vice president.
Outstanding.
And I finished my career at Carnegie Corporation, New York, where I directed all the grant-making in education.
Great.
And I have a lot of interest in foreign affairs.
Well, you'll have to school me on how Professor Emeriti behave themselves. Or don't.
Rambunctiously.
My name is Marina La Palma, and I love coming to these things and learning a lot. I've been to Turkey a couple of times. My background is a retired professor of literature, art critic, And I have a newsletter on Substack that is about books and a lot of about historical books. So
My name is William Fidoff. I'm still do some work as an independent consultant, but mostly retired. I spent most of my career doing economic and financial research. Even though I'm a mathematician by training, I still do some policy analysis. I studied in Germany, that's where I got my degrees from, and therefore knew a lot of Turkish people there, and I'm very sort of familiar with issues around Turkey, also very interested in the First World War. So, a lot of the stories of the origins of the Turkish Republic. So also very interested to hear what you have to say.
Oh, I'm interested to hear your reality. Yeah, we're a rare breed, the people who are interested in the origins of the Turkish Republic. So it's good to find a soulmate out there.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm John Scully, happily retired for many years. I was a Russian studies major, although I did nothing with it. But that makes me interested in anything having to do with the Russian periphery, which I'm sure they wouldn't like to be referred to as.
I'm Wayne Hardy. I'm over the hill nuclear engineer. I worked at the lab at Los Alamos National Lab for 30 some years, and retired in 2010. And we've tried to do 3 international trips a year, including Turkey.
And you've been to Turkey?
Yeah.
How many of you have been to Turkey? Did you like it?
Yes.
It's utterly amazing.
I'm Linda Hardy, and I've been on a lot of trips with Wayne Hardy. Turkey certainly was one of my favorite trips, way up there at the top. We really enjoyed it. I spent a lot of time at a thrift shop in Los Alamos volunteering.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Ann Yalman. I'm a retired lawyer, and I had a Turkish friend in college and has visited her like 4 or 5 times. And I have a Turkish last name, even though I'm not Turkish.
Yeah, hi, I'm James Stewart. I'm a retired Foreign Service officer. Never served in Turkey, been there several times, and I've been to a number of the countries in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time in Italy and Greece, and those places are nearby.
They sure are.
Yeah.
They sure are.
I'm Sue Benedict. I'm a retired nurse, and I have been interested in foreign affairs since high school. I was an American Field Service student. I went to France, and my children started Waldorf education, and I've met people from everywhere, and I've traveled to see them, so it's been interesting. And I'm very interested in Turkey.
So, Rosanna Jordan, I work for the UN, 25 years, but I, as an operations manager, working for one of the UN agencies, basically works in conflict areas, so in Asia, Southeast Asia, Africa, all Latin America, and the Caribbean. And I'm a world traveler. I've been interested in geopolitics, foreign affairs.
This is again.
And I'm flying to Istanbul too.
That is, we just got another player in our game. Would you?
The remote.
Oh, is the remote here? Okay. To quote the former president of the United States, you're fired. This is just the kind of group that I go for. I knew, I had met several of you before at the symposium. And so now, of course, I got to ask, I've been gone for 6 months or 8 months or whatever it is. Anything happen in the world? Yes, I think it has. And we want to touch on some of it. Now, one of the certain premises about how my own work and my own thinking has evolved over time, to the great frustration of my family and my students, for example, is that a fact. Okay, thanks.
Control your own way.
Okay, I will try, but I'm sure I'll run into a problem. Because
Yes.
This is not my,
I know.
is that nothing is without its antecedent.
Yes.
Nothing is without its antecedent. All right, and it's sort of my experience of it was when early in my career, and I, like you, went through similar or certain kinds of things that were very important to me. I mean, as a social scientist, that's the headspace I've always had. And so when I was real small, the civil rights movement, televised, was extremely important to me. I mean, I was just a little kid, but I had some thoughts about what was going on there. And then, I got a little older, and we had these, and right around that time, the assassination of President Kennedy, which was paradigm changing for me at a very tender age. Then we moved into Vietnam. We moved into, the assassinations of Bobby Kennedy and Martin King. We moved into Richard Nixon, we moved to Watergate. And then I guess disco or something in the 70s, whatever happened there. You can remember it, you weren't there. But I guess the upshot is these things were extremely influential in terms of how I thought about the world. And so as a consequence, when I'd be talking about an idea, for example, in class early on, I would make reference to these things. And, since I wasn't all that much older than my students, and they kind of got it. As I went on, however, I began to realize that when I would refer to Vietnam, for example, I would refer to Nixon, whatever it is I was doing, talking about. As students got younger, I realized that my references to these things were very much like when my parents would tell me about the Great Depression or the Second World War and all these kinds of things. And not that I was so, in terms of age, distant from, let's say, 1945, but that it was gone, done, and over with, and not relevant to me. I would hear the stories and sort of empathize or whatever, but it didn't seem to have to do with me. So what I tried to do, my first line of attack, was to update my references, try to stay up with them. All right, and then as they got younger, I had to update more and more and more. And I said, you know what? And this dawned on me a year or so ago, that 3/4 of the students at Arizona State University weren't even alive on September the 11th, 2001. And I thought, what the hell? Frankly, kids, nothing very interesting has happened in your life. So what I've essentially forced my students to do is to go back deeper into history. If necessary, the beginnings of human life on Earth 250,000 years ago, to understand that over these millennia, humans behave just as stupidly as they have always done. All right, if we want to understand human beings, or we want to understand how they organize themselves, we got to understand what sort of the fundamental human headspace is. All right, that was, of course, an interesting reaction. It was kind of, here we go again. We're going to hear about, hunters and gatherers and stuff like that. Now, that's part of every talk that I do, but I do recognize in this case, you're there with me, so I don't have to go all the way back to the Stone Age or something like that. I can just sort of go back to a point of relevance. And we're talking about Turkish foreign policy. First of all, let me point out that my background is not international relations. It's not comparative politics. I'm a political sociologist. So as a consequence, I'm not really, foreign policy is not something about me, it's a part of a larger mosaic. All right, what foreign policy is really about is it's perhaps one of the most transactional areas in international work, in global work. The purpose of foreign policy is to advance interest A versus interest B, avoiding, of course, the most extreme exchange between A and B, and that would be some sort of conflict. All right, but essentially, it is not different from the Middle East bazaar, where somebody has some goods, somebody else has some goods, and what they do is bargain. All right, so it's a multi-level chess game. Now, the United States is unique in this chess game, in that we are the only ones that, let's say, attribute great, I suppose, moral clarity of what we do. Other places seem to be much more comfortable being transactional, but we have this much larger. We're doing it. We are advancing American interests for the good of the world. Yes. Now, whether that's true or not, that is in large measure how the kind of narrative the United States puts around its work. Every country does that to some extent, but to far lesser extent. Now, so when we're looking at foreign policy, basically we're looking at how a nation advances its own interests. All right, apart from maybe larger claims. All right, now, so we're going to understand the context of Turkish foreign policy today, but we've got to go back at least to Ataturk. Okay, everything in the Republic of Turkey since 1923, even slightly before, goes to Ataturk and the extent to which he was an absolutely transformational figure. All right, first of all, in my view, in terms of as a political genius, and that he has few peers in history, certainly, of the history of the 20th century. And as such, his contributions, in many ways, he was way ahead of his time. In other respects, he was very much a man of his time. And so as a consequence, we kind of got to understand which place he's coming from. But it begins with him, and it begins with the revolution. It begins with War of Independence, 1918 to 1921. And then when he started to put it away, the War of Independence really had to do with, hey, this works great. The end of World War I, and this is what the Treaty of Cyprus that partitioned the losing Ottoman Empire. Remember, the Ottomans were one of the great empires of all time, one of the largest empires of all time. They controlled much of North Africa. They controlled all of the important areas of what we call the Middle East, certainly including, to the resentment of many other Muslims, the holy parts of the Saudi, what is now the Saudi Peninsula. This was, of course, pre-Saudi. The Brits hadn't installed the House of Saudi yet. And it was a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire, not unlike the Roman Empire in that regard. And just as, in the Roman Empire, people from Rome got a better deal than the subjects there. That's basically how the Ottomans conducted themselves. That's how empires were done. But at the end of World War I, it was supposed to be partitioned this way. All right, this great expanse of the Ottomans from 1683 was concentrated right here. This is right around, obviously, Ankara. All right, now, Ankara was not the capital of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire's capital was Istanbul. It's their holy city, if you will. But every place else was partitioned to the winners, you might say, you had the Italians, the French, this was, the Sykes-Picot Treaty, the secret treaty that took place between Britain and France, that France was to get this. There was to be on Armenia, because Armenians presumably were very friendly to the Allies, which certainly makes sense under the circumstances. The Kurds were to get this region right here, or at least it was called the Kurdish area with the expectation that there would be a Kurdish nation there. And then the British, all the British were really interested in is dominating the world. So they wanted the Dardanelles. Now, if you remember, Ataturk made his name on his defense of the Dardanelles. He was one of the few Ottoman generals that actually won stuff. And so as a kind of, he was a hero right there. But his defense of the Dardanelles went down really into legend. That's the Anzac times. And one of the things that Ataturk did that was so brilliant was to say, you know, that the men that died, well, he did say this to his troops. He said, I'm not ordering you to fight, I'm ordering you to die. All right. So they were a little motivated, I guess, his troops. But it was a terribly bloody, long, tens of thousands of deaths. But after it was all done, when the Republic was established, he invited Australia and New Zealand because he said the men that died were all of our children. And so as every year in Istanbul, there's this gathering of families of the Anzac troops. Yeah, very generous way, but that's way ahead of our story. Okay. This was unacceptable to a remnant of the Ottoman army, this partition of things. And so as a consequence, these remnants of the Ottoman army decided that they were going to conduct a war to get rid of these foreign invaders. Okay. These were foreigners against the empire. So even though the Sultan did not explicitly say, would you guys conduct a war on my behalf? Not at all. He was working very closely with the British trying to survive. So the generals, Ataturk prominent among them, is we're going to conduct a war for the Sultan anyway. All right, and so he did. A war of independence. All the pictures you see of Ataturk at mosques praying, okay, this was during the War of Independence because he was convincing the people this was for and on behalf of the Sultan. All right, so a war they had. The Italians gave up right away. Remember, these countries are very exhausted from this terrible war. It really was. First use of weapons of mass destruction was cool. So it wasn't hard to get rid of the Italians. It's it. Thanks, bye. We have other things to do. All right, the French were defeated. They're happy to back into Syria. The Armenians there was no there. The Kurds. It wasn't a problem. The problem was Britain to some extent and Greece. Okay, the British, you can do business with them once things evolved to the point they were happy to back out in exchange for Black Sea access. Basically, that's all they wanted. They didn't want to control anything. Just access was enough. Problem was the Greeks. Why were the Greeks a unique problem here? You guys know. What's that?
Until the 1500s, it was Greece.
Absolutely true. Okay. Yeah, Istanbul was the Sultan's holy city, but they weren't the only ones for whom it was the holy city. This was Constantinople. Okay, this is where the Roman Empire went to die eventually, hundreds of years later, but there they were. And so as a consequence, while the Italian, what became the Italian part, the Roman part of the empire really ended by the 5th century. It was really, ball game was over. And it survived, the Roman Empire survived in the, what they call the Eastern Roman Empire, started by Constantine. Constantine, who was known for what? Conversion to Christianity, absolutely. And in fact, if you watch Rick Steves, Rick always throws in this line that in Rome in 300, you could be executed if you were a Christian. Rome in 400, you could be executed if you were not a Christian. So that's, you know, all right, but this was the center of Christianity. Yeah, there was a pope or two out there, but in terms of what was really happening in Christianity, it was there, and it was there that the centerpiece of Christianity, the first cathedral of all time, the Hagia Sophia or Hagia Sophia, depending on how you roll, okay, which is still is absolutely magnificent today. And there's a side story I'll tell you about later. But okay, in the Greek narrative, there was always this intention to come back and reclaim this land, Istanbul in particular, or Constantinople in particular, okay? So they weren't gonna go just because this ragtag bunch of Ottomans told them to. They were going to fight, and fight they did. The War of Independence was largely a fight between the Ottomans and the ex-Ottomans and the Greeks. And basically what happened is the Ataturk's army pushed them back to Smyrna, which is Izmir, at which point they literally throw them into the sea and burn down Smyrna as well, burned down Izmir. Okay. By 1922, the War of Independence was over. Ataturk had won. He won it for the Sultan and immediately went to the Sultan, or his people went to the Sultan and said, would it be a good time for you to leave? All right, but why don't you go join your friends in the United Kingdom, in England? And so indeed, that's what the Ottoman family did, the remaining Ottoman family. And for many decades, the Ottoman descendants were British. And just recently, under Tayyip Erdogan, they've been invited back to Turkey. Not to do anything, but just to be there. All right, the Treaty of Lausanne, post-revolution, which restored the nation to approximately what it was. All right, now, the capital forever of this land owned by whomever was Istanbul, Constantinople, Byzantium. But Ataturk chose this other city to be the capital, Ankara. Any guesses as to why?
Being central?
Central, that's part of it, yeah.
Central, not only geographically, but I'm sure ethnically.
Mhm. Yeah. And anybody of those who went to Turkey, did you go to Ankara?
It's the Ottoman base.
Ankara, not so much. There were probably more at that time. There were probably more goats than people.
Probably harder to invade.
Exactly. It's New Mexico. Ankara is like New Mexico.
Harder to invade.
All right, now, Istanbul, especially if you've been there, it's hanging right out there in the sea. All right, this is part of the place that you want to protection. So Ankara becomes the capital. All right, because it is defensible. You can, you can see them coming. And after that, Ataturk decided that this is no longer, of course, an Ottoman state. This is the new Republic Turkey. All right. The name Turkey, like so many things in the Middle East, this has a British root. From what I understand, this is a little bit hard to believe, but I'll tell you the story anyway. That the British attributed the name Turkey. They named all these places, you know. Iraq, there's no such place. Nobody called themselves Iraqis until Britain decided this place was Iraq. Palestine, that wasn't called Palestine until the British anointed it that. This area was named Turkey because of the mistaken belief that the bird came from here. All right, we know where the bird came from. I don't know the answer, but that's the word. All right, Ataturk comes along. Remember, everybody's calling this area Turkey. And so he says, okay, then Turks we are. And he said, essentially, we are Turks. We are a new people. Okay, a new people in one of the most ancient lands in the world. What's new was what this Turkish Republic was going to be. Okay, one, the intention of creating a forward-looking, I use that because that was his editor's words, Western type nation. Okay, now, interesting here. The Ottoman Empire was sort of the ideal type of Eastern Empire. All right, now, to be actually accurate, Islam is part of the Western perspective. It's part of the monotheistic perspective. It's not a mistake that the Quran is full of references to Christian and Jewish writings and things like that. But in terms of the Western world, Turkey was East. Okay, he wanted to create a Western nation, a modern nation, a secular nation. Remember, this is like saying Vatican City, we're going to secularize Vatican City. Okay, pretty audacious. Scientific and technologically based governance, modern governance. All right. And the creation of a new nationality, a new ethnicity, the Turks. Okay, can you think of any place else in the world where post-revolution, a new people was invented, were invented? Us, Americans. Okay, a multiracial, multi-ethnic society with a new name. Americans, nobody had ever referred to these people as Americans before. We were English or whomever. All right, we were a new people. Like us, like Americans, Turks were a new people. Okay, and there was sort of a, I guess, you all remember when the term black for what we call African Americans now was something of an aspersion when we were young. It's a little bit of one, not extreme, but it was not considered a nice thing. What happened? One of the signature moments of the Black Power movement was to say, I'm black and I'm proud. Black is beautiful. Embrace the term. That's exactly what Ataturk did. All right, and Turkey was sort of an aspersion. Not to Ataturk, he embraced it. That's the name of this new people. All right, now, Turkish students' oath. I am Turkish. They still say this today, by the way. I am Turkish, honest and hardworking. My principle, I'm sorry I put it in a color, it's hard to see here. My principle is to protect the younger, to respect the elder, to love my homeland and my nation more than myself. My ideal is to rise, to progress. Okay, that was a big deal. They weren't praying to God, they were praying to one another, if you will. All right, and there was an emphasis on removing tribal strife. Okay, remember, you saw that mosaic. You got Armenians here, you got you know, Kurds over there. So you've still got Greeks, you know, around. And so you could make it easier for all to have, you know, engage as being Turks by take care of a few things. Well, here's one of the facts, one of the conditions. And first of all, remember, this was a broken up, this area had suffered greatly in World War I. Okay, so certainly the whole economic infrastructure has to be revived somehow. But you still have this problem. You have this problem of people speaking different languages. You have this problem of them praying to different gods. You have this problem of them identifying themselves as Kurd or Greek or whatever it is, Armenian. So how does Ataturk go about eliminating this? One thing he does is eliminates their language. And he actually, what he chose to magnify is the street Turkish. Okay, this is the street language of the people. This is Halk language. And the Ottomans spoke a different thing. Okay, they spoke a different language. They ate different food, by the way, from the people of the street. They took the street Turkish. It has its origins in Central Asia and so forth. He then changed the alphabet. All right, so the alphabet, he Latinized the alphabet and he scientized it. It has 24 characters, all of which are consistently pronounced. So in 5 minutes, I could teach you how to pronounce any Turkish word. Understanding it's a different deal, but in terms of pronouncing it, you wouldn't have any problem with that. All right, that made the problem he was truly trying to combat, and that is he inherited a land of 5% literacy. Okay, now, obviously it took him some time. He did this with John Dewey. John Dewey was his guy that he brought in. This famous picture of Dewey standing there, and Ataturk is at the chalkboard writing what Dewey told him.
Dewey
right?
of the decimal system.
Yeah, yeah,
That Dewey.
that Dewey. And so he introduced, he Latinized the alphabet. He made sure everybody could read it and pronounce it. Very scientific thing. And that is the language that he introduced all over this new country. All right, again, whatever you were a Turk first. It wasn't a big deal to Ataturk, to whom you prayed. If you prayed to anybody, that was a problem for him, but it wasn't like, you know, you're okay if you prayed to Allah, but not okay if you prayed to anyone else. That wasn't the big deal. The big deal was I self-identification. Yeah.
Excuse my impatience,
Okay.
but you've been talking steadily. I think a lot of us know this background.
Oh, do you?
So
Okay.
what I would like you to do is tell me right now,
Yes.
what is the state 100 years from now
Okay.
of all of these highly, I think most of us consider highly worthy goals and
Right.
even achievements.
Okay.
How far have we regressed?
Give me 5 minutes and I'll get there.
Okay.
Let me interject, I don't know this background.
You graduated, Elliot. All right, anyway, I will go through it quickly. Yes, sir.
I wanted to know how one person could do all this. He must have had a movement.
He had
from the
guys.
wings
Oh, yeah.
behind him.
He had, remember, he is in a capital city that he owns. All right, it's not like going to Washington DC where you have the remnants of everybody else all over the place. This was pristine for him. So he got to staff it as he wanted to, with the people he wanted to. By the way, that was part of the compromising elements regarding how the Armenian massacre, the narrative created around that. But yeah, Basically he could do what he wanted, and he was the president, and he formed a political party called the Republican People's Party. But Ataturk didn't stand for election. No way, baby. No way. And so basically, this was one man rule. No question about it. Okay. Now, I call it the last new nation. And this is a reference to my own work. What was the first new nation? Seymour Martin Lipset, United States. The last new nation. Now, remember, part of the Wilson's 14 points was ethnicity as a basis for nationhood. That's how come in Europe, everybody who's Roman Catholic was called, if you were in that area, Hungarian. And the Orthodox were Romanian. And that's basically, religion was the stand-in for ethnicity, which is why Cyprus, by the way, is what it is. But ethnicity, again, a pure social construct, not different from Turk, became a basis for ethnicity. This was sort of the last intentional, secular, multi-ethnic new people, right, that came along. That's why it was sort of the last new nation in terms of how I presented it. All right. Patience, Ellie, I'll get there. Okay, republicanism, these were the 6 arrows. These were the principles of Ataturk's regime. Republicanism, rule of law, populism, used in his terms, I'm using his words. Populism then did not mean rabble coming up in the streets and burning down stuff. This was the people, the sovereignty of the people. Nationalism, Turkishness as an identity. All right, laicism, separation of religion and state. This really means marginalizing religion. There was a department, and has been a Department of Religious Affairs, whose job it is to certify imams. Okay, now, up until very recently, what this meant was essentially, we in the government will write the sermons for you. Okay, and this is what you may present. All right, statism, a man of his time. In the 20th century, the hot idea was statism. The state is the entity that handles the market, whatever market there is. It handles currency, of course. It handles production of things. All right, so Turkey had made its own everything, all right, early on. Reformism, governance, not revolution. And essentially, that's what our founders intended to do. All right. The history goes on, as you know it pretty well. A crucial element is NATO membership. Now, just this background, I'm sure you know this, Elliot. Turkey was officially neutral. And in that neutrality, it was very much disposed to the Allies. The determination was made to get actively involved in World War II in such a fragile state was not a great idea. So they tried to remain neutral, but they were very friendly to the Allies, provided them passage and came up with issues relative to the passage of cis material and stuff like that. So they tried to be helpful. They declared war on February 23rd, 1945, a whole 6 weeks or something like that, out May the 8th day, before the end. And that put them on the winning side, sure enough. And this helped NATO membership. It gave Turkey a seat at the table. It allowed them to participate in the U.S. defense shield. I'm sure you all know the story in the Kennedy-Khrushchev confrontation, Cuba. The news that we got was, Kennedy goes eye to eye with Khrushchev, and Khrushchev stands down, removes his missiles from Cuba. Well, that point. They had Polaris missiles, I believe, in Turkey, right on the border. So the deal was, you take your missiles out of Turkey, we'll take our missiles out of Cuba. That's the deal. And that's what went down, but it looked much more heroic than that when I was 11 years old. All right, it also introduced, remember, the focus of Ataturk and his followers was that Turkey was to be a modern nation like the Europeans. So what does he want to do? Or what do they want to do? They want to join variations of the European, prior to the European Union. This is, the common market and, all this kind of stuff. And they applied in 1963. All right. They are the only applicant to the European community by whatever name, whose status is still pending. All right. Now, there have been times when it looked promising, like they were going to get in, but all of a sudden there were new issues and stuff, why they couldn't. And what frosted the Turks was at the end, when the collapse of the Soviet Union, and all these places became nations that weren't nations before. All of them came in before Turkey. Turkey's status was still pending. Now they're told, it's because your economy really isn't up to date and stuff, or this and that. Well, countries came into EU without economies. All right, Malta, Cyprus, the whole Cyprus story is right. But all right, and the states of the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, this kind of stuff. When Bulgaria, talk about it in the front, when Bulgaria gets in front, that went a lot. This was more than they could handle. Okay,
But they're the only Muslim country.
but that's
They're
right.
the only Muslim country.
That is really the point. And the suggestion was this EU is and the Turks say this, a Christian club. Yeah. Okay. We're coming there, Kelly. All right. They are still pending, by the way. Tiger Haired one has probably done enough to make the line or the time longer. All right. They began to be involved in every war that the United States was in or that NATO was in. All right. They had a fair number of troops in Korea. As I understand it, a great number dead. They were big players in Korea. Less so in Vietnam, although they did provide humanitarian assistance and political support to the US. Vietnam. Afghanistan, they were part of the NATO group. And then, as I can't see this, but at the time, or in fact, only 10 years ago, Erdogan said, Turkey will stay in Afghanistan even after all the other forces have left, and will leave only when our Afghan brothers and sisters tell us, thank you, now you can go home. Well, they left before us, but no. Then there's Iraq. Okay. You know your geography. Turkey has a border with Iraq. Turkey has been an ally of the United States, since World War II. The United States thinks, of course, we can get to. Of course, we want Turkey involved. Look at this nice little border here. All right. First of all, what did the United States want? They wanted access to the Incirlik Air Base for purposes of the war. Incirlik Air Base is in middle of it. And also a northern path, you might say, a northern front into Iraq. All right, pretty straightforward. The Turkish government, which was prior to Erdogan and his party, it negotiated $100 billion exchange for this kind of access. All good. All right. The new government, as of 2002, Erdogan wasn't quite on the scene yet. He had been banned for reading a secular poem by a Nazim Hikmet, who is a socialist guy who died in the Soviet Union, and in which it contains the lines, our our minarets or our missiles, this kind of thing. Okay, he was jailed for violations of the secularism principle. And so he wasn't on the scene, he was politically banned, but his party wasn't. And in the first real multi-party, reasonably democratic election in Turkey's history, and democratic in the sense that all sectors were allowed to vote, which had not always been the case. Erdogan's party, Sans Erdogan at this moment, won, and they vowed to continue with his commitment to the United States and Iraq. However, and I happened to be there, in terms of the polls that were taken at the time, 96% of all Turks opposed getting involved in Iraq. So a healthy majority of Turks thought this was the wrong approach to a guy they had lived next to for quite some time, and they knew how he worked, and this is the bad idea, is what they thought. And they sure don't want Turkish troops involved. All right. But the government went along with it. The parliament met in March of 2003 and returned a positive vote by 4 votes. They had approved this involvement. Wait a minute, the parliamentarian of the Parliamentary Assembly says, the law requires 51% or 50% plus 1 of all parliament members, and some 16 or 17 members had stayed home. Therefore, the proposal fails. Okay. Now, if you're interested, I'll give you a couple of stories about how this went down. But the point is, it did go down. All right. The Americans are ballistic about this. It's kind of interesting use of the term in these circumstances. But all right, the United States felt betrayed, to say the least, of this. This screws up part of their battle plan, in taking out Saddam and his friends. And so this new government is not to be trusted. So the Americans did all kinds of nasty little crappy things to Turkey. Obviously, diplomatic relations were not broken, but things like international exchanges, Fulbright, stuff like that, all kinds of interference with that. And so it was just pretty nasty between, and especially since they had assumed that the Turks bargained in good faith. They concluded they did not bargain in good faith. In fact, that was not entirely true, but essentially the idea is the new government did not count votes, did not count heads in the parliament. It is a mistake that Mitch McConnell would not have made. But this starts theory. Here you go, Elliot. All right. Tensions between Turkey and the West. Old allies suddenly having, as of 2003 forward, difficulties with one another. First of all, you got this new government who no longer is quite so smitten with the West, not quite so smitten with secularism, the base. In fact, it's interesting, it's not unlike Donald Trump's base, the United States, in that it contains, among other things, entrepreneurs, technology guys, some of the big business. If you were in Turkey, you might have seen Ulker, chocolate, this kind of stuff. Ulker was a big contributor to this party. But basically, a big hunk of them are conservative religious people. Okay, people that had been cut out of politics from Ataturk forward. All right. what happens anytime you suppress a particular part of a society? They will come back in with a certain amount of energy. So Tayyip Erdogan, having been persecuted, sent to jail for violations of secularism, and the fact that he was sort of a street kid, an Istanbul street kid, and that he was a serious Muslim, he became their guy, not unlike how Trump has become the guy. People would say, all right, he may be a crook, he may be this, he may be that, but he's our crook, he's our guy. So as a consequence, this becomes, especially with the elements of the entrepreneurial class and the pro-EU, Erdogan promised to get Turkey in the EU, by the way. All right, and the EU is at least viewed as being a tremendous economic boost to Turkey. Maybe it is, I don't know. But the point is, they look for it. And they keep, so, but they got resentment. This base, a lot of, even beyond the base, have resentment about the way the US behaved in Iran. Resentment, treatment by the EU, which we've discussed before, pissed off at being overlooked by the likes of Bulgaria and Malta. Personal animosity between Erdogan and Western leaders, except his good buddy, DJP, because they're sort of alike. All right. The EU leaders claimed extortion. The deal is when Syria blew up in 2019, something like that, 2019. The European leaders were very concerned about all kinds of Syrian refugees coming into Europe because they wanted to. You read about the people trying to go through the Mediterranean Sea in a raft and get to Europe. They did not want a flood of Syrians. So Erdogan says, I'll take them. You just pay for this. And so they bargained, and in excess of 2.3 billion euro came to Turkey in order to handle the problem. So anytime, by the way, Erdogan wants to get under the skin of the Europeans, he says, oh, just open the gate. Let all the Syrians come your way. All right. So Turkey in the West. In terms of Israel, okay, early on, Israel and Turkey were considered themselves the only civilized countries in the region. They were allies. Okay, joint military operations, all those kinds of things took place between Turkey and Israel. A lot of Israelis in Istanbul and Ankara, a lot of Turks in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Okay. Got a different sheriff in town now. All right, this different sheriff, not only, I don't know to the extent he felt a bond with his Arab Muslim brothers, but he at least acted like that. All right, in many ways, it is suggested Erdogan fancies himself a new version of the Sultan. Okay, and he sort of would like to be the leader with his, his Arab brother. But at any rate, you come and get this back and forth between Israel and Turkey some of the time, and you may remember this was a conference in, I think it was in the United States, where the president of Israel at the time and Erdogan shared a stage. Okay, the Israeli president sits down, Erdogan comes and says, I won't sit with this man because of his crimes against the Palestinian people, blah, 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 and walks off. Okay, so what former pals now become rivals in this region. Yet, he doesn't close the door entirely. They break diplomatic relations for a time after this. Israel pulls itself, its ambassador back. They've restored them, I guess. And they began to get business going again. And Turkey was instrumental in the deal to the Israeli-Saudi deal that's trying to be accomplished. So it's not absolute an absolute break between Israel and Turkey, but there are tensions, and what Turkey tries to do is play it both ways. Okay? Playing it both ways becomes the standard when dealing with the Black Sea, dealing with the Ukrainian issue, and now with the Israel-Gaza issue. Okay. Black Sea. You've got what you have here. And there are problems all over the place. This is the tough neighborhood to which I refer. Okay, you've got Turkey, Bulgaria, old tensions there, Romania, but they're stable. There's nothing active going on. Okay, when we get to Ukraine, what's going on with Ukraine? Here's what Turkey's trying to accomplish. One is they do several things to assist and support Ukraine. One of the big deals, this truly was a big deal for Ukraine, is make sure that Ukrainian agricultural products can get through. Okay, and they control, of course, this area. And so they just make sure that the Ukrainian agricultural products can get out, get sold, and bring revenue back to them. Okay, they also have limited informally, yes, the movement of Russian warships in the area. Again, it's not quite direct. It's just they hold up ships for papers and stuff like that. It's not this outright snub of Vladimir Putin, but that's the idea. All right, they don't want to make moves. Remember, the rivalries in this region are ancient. They didn't start this last week, or this last
Can
month.
you say Troy?
Right. Yes. Okay, and that's why, by the way, it's not an unreasonable, their position about Iraq is they don't want the United States coming and messing with it. All right, it goes back a lot longer than any perception of American interests go back. Okay, so it is not smart in Erdogan's view for Turkey to do anything else other than to ensure its own interests. And ensuring its own interest means, among other things, not beginning a new round of conflict with Russia, which, by the way, was one of the factors that ended the Ottoman Empire, the Russian Empire versus the Ottomans. Okay, so as a consequence, no problem, no rupture between Turkey and Russia in terms of diplomatic relations. Erdogan still goes to Moscow and shakes Erdogan's hand, and it's not like they don't know whom one another is. They know very well whom one another is, and really neither one of them want any part of the other. So it's something of a standoff, but it allows Turkey to play it both ways. Okay, coming back around, I'll go to Greece first, then I'll go to Israel, Palestine. I won't go to Greece. Okay, Israel, Gaza. All right. Erdogan has this rep of disliking Israel, but that has changed over the past decade or so. All right, so he doesn't want a problem with Netanyahu, but at the same time, he is the standard bearer of the Muslim people. So what he'll do is verbally criticize the Israelis, as he has done. But at the same time, he continues to trade with them. It is an attempt to not lose favor on either side, basically to not have a problem with either side. Now, should things continue to deteriorate in Israel, Gaza, that could change. That could change. All right, but for the time being, Erdogan would not like to have a problem either with Hamas or Israel right now at the moment. So that's kind of, so the theme continues to be have it both ways, play it both ways. See if you can balance interests such that it doesn't pull Turkey into the whirlpool here. Okay, Greece is kind of interesting. What's happening with Greece is partially old rivalry. Okay, obviously, there is no older rivalry than that between the Greeks and what are known now officially the Turks. They are, you might say, DNA kin, separated only by religion. That in the great post-World War I land transfer, and I alluded to this a little bit, just like Hungarian, Roman Catholic Central Europeans called Hungarians, Orthodox were called Romanians and Serbs and so forth. Anybody who was Christian in Turkey or in the remains of the Ottoman Empire was considered a Greek, even though they spoke no Greek. They had no Greek in them, but they were Orthodox, which makes a hell of a lot of sense given what Constantinople was for them, and just Turkey's role in Christianity in the years past. Big time, been to Ephesus, saw where Paul spoke and all that. You got that. So there's this ancient animosity. At times, 50s, 60s, there was a potential of war. Times have changed though. And of course, a flashpoint with Cyprus. So-called Turkish Cyprus, not necessarily ethnic Turks there, they're pirates and people who came through there. South Cyprus, they called themselves that, they identified. Why? Religion. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, I've spent a couple of years in Cyprus.
Oh,
And it's a fascinating place on a number of levels. But in this modern political side, there are a lot of Turks in the north, including the Turkish army.
Oh, yeah.
With the tanks.
Yeah.
Turkish money, Turkish stamps, Turkish telephone exchange.
Yes.
One of the Turkish area codes is North Cyprus.
Yeah, you're right. And but here's what's even more to that story. And you're absolutely right on. All right, Turkey is the only nation that recognizes North Cyprus as a nation.
That's true.
Okay, essentially, besides gambling, their source of money and tourism. It's apparently the North got their greatest beaches there. Aside from tourism, their only source of money besides any black market stuff is Turkey. Okay, Turkey funds the money. They can't have the telephone exchange. It's exactly right. Officially, it's a Turkish telephone exchange, as is the postal exchange. Officially, it's Turkey. It's the only way to get the mail through, and Turks have to bring it to them. All right, times have changed. We're in the 21st century. Really, outside of minor issues in the Aegean Sea, both modern Turkey and modern Greece had better things to do than threaten to go to war with each other. And particularly, neither of them give a damn really about Cyprus. Not really. Okay, that is to say, the Turks, they'd love to have be rid of this money pit. They really would. And in 2004, when the Annan Plan came down, the opportunity would be Turkey can finally get rid of the Northern Cypriots as a adopted child. Erdogan goes down during the election. Erdogan goes down to North Cyprus and twists the Turkish Cypriots were assumed to be anti in Antoine, and they would vote against it. He went down there and twisted every arm he could to vote for it. They voted for it. Okay. South Cyprus. Again, it's not quite as isolated, but Greece has its own problems. Okay, it doesn't need, but for reasons of nationalism and not giving in, it's sort of like, sort of drawn to act like they're protecting. They're one of the protector nations along with the UK. And so they sort of stuck with it. But this was their chance to be rid of Cyprus as well, 2004. So what happens is the night before the election, the president of the Republic of Cyprus, South Cyprus, then goes on TV with his tearful plea to his citizens to reject this plan. Now, they thought South Cyprus was in the bag. Well, they rejected it. Okay, this will keep, the threat was, if Cyprus rejects this, they will be thrown out of it. They will not be an acceptable candidate for the European Union, besides pissing people off. Well, what happens? They vote against it, the North votes for it, the South votes against it, and a few months later, Cyprus is admitted to the European Union. Oh, is Tayyip angry at this? All right. Again, so his problem with Cyprus continues to remain unsolved. Okay, other donors have taken over a lot of what Greece had to do. They're in the Union. They get money from the European Union. They also are the money laundering capital of the world.
Absolutely. Russian money.
Russians go to South Cyprus for tourism. The Bank of Cyprus is one of the major institutions, financial institutions that serve this constituency. They sort of, I guess, fancy themselves as Switzerland of the 21st century, and they'll take anybody's money and do whatever they want to, or whatever the customer wants, and this kind of stuff. So Cyprus remains a political problem for Turkey, an economic problem for the United States in the South, a Russian autocrat problem, and life goes on. So essentially, what Turkey's role has been trying to do is that it's been trying to maintain its posture in this region without sacrificing its soldiers, without going to war with anybody. All right, so this has caused Erdogan to act very Islamic some days and very secular other days. You know, he's very traditional in one days, but then he's one of the modern, world leaders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he has his constituency, and in what have become as free and fair elections as exist anywhere among the democracies, Turkey has one. It has an illiberal democracy, I'll give you that. It's not a democracy we would like to live in. Perhaps almost have, I don't know. But it is nonetheless, it has achieved the goal of popular sovereignty. The army no longer is any factor in Turkish politics, except as a negative. So
What do you mean by as a negative?
as a negative, that is to say, the military's endorsement or attempt to control anything in Turkish politics would be greatly resented.
Oh,
Okay, so military doesn't do that, they are neutralized. All right, so here's what I think. All right, Erdogan is a key player in Ukraine, both sides. So what's wrong in Turkey? Is it an inability to separate his angel voice from his devil voice? Or it's correcting the Ukraine crisis. All right. The poor victim Ukraine with the bad Russian guy. Erdogan pops up with some version of a palm leaf and it makes everybody happy. All right, what to you, I have my answer, but what to you today strikes you about this whole story? The people of the world. Yeah.
I'm really struck by Erdogan, as you said, about taking in the Syrian refugees, but also throwing his weight around with his NATO position
Sure.
and Sweden's reaction to
Oh, you're Sweden, okay.
NATO.
Sweden's entry into NATO, Finland's entry into NATO From the point of view of everybody else in the world, really, literally, it should be a no-brainer, right? They've been trying to sweet talk those countries coming into NATO for a long time. Should be a no-brainer. With enough persuasion, and this could have been some cash, Finland, any objection, Finland was removed. The objection is to Sweden. Why? Just for fun? Just to be an obstacle? To be a pain?
Swedish politics versus, I can't remember the specific issues, but I think they may have had some Turkish dissidents. And, yeah,
they are alleged to have, I don't know personally, but they are alleged to be a safe house, if you will, for the Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK. They allegedly helped fund the PKK during the bad old days when kind of Marxist-Leninist branch of the Kurds. And one of the unfortunate things is that to regard all Kurds as Marxist-Leninist terrorists is ridiculous. Because if you know that there are probably more deeply pious Muslims and very much Turkish nationalists as there are Marxist-Leninist terrorists, but unfortunately, it is widely held that Kurd equals terrorist in the mentality of many Turkish people, and that's truly sad. Because, all right, first of all, they regard anybody in the southeast as a Kurd, and that's not true. It's a very vibrant, if you've ever been there, multi-ethnic place. There's Arabs and there's Jews and there's Armenians and there's all kinds of people down there, not just Kurds. And Kurds generally have been extremely loyal, first to the Ottoman Empire and then to the Republic. So this is an unfortunate prejudice that doesn't help things at all. But nonetheless, it appears there is something to the belief that Sweden was a harbor for actual PKK terrorists. How true it is, I don't know. What it will take is some money, maybe, some persuasion, some sweet talking, some diplomacy to get Turkey's vote. Hungary held out for a while until Hungary got what it wanted, at which point they said no problem here. And so this will be at least a bit more of a process. Finland's in them.
They just said Sweden was in.
What's that?
This is new,
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned.
Well, no, I said Finland is in. Sweden is still.
It's in the parliament.
I thought,
What's that? Yes, it's going to the parliament and they have struggled.
There is some.
but he's given the okay that it's going to the.
And then he's drawn it back a few days or a little while ago, a month ago. He sort of said, well, maybe not. And so, but the parliament is to decide. Now, the parliament are his guys. Parliament is not what the Turkish parliament once was. So it's interesting. We'll see.
But this is specifics. You have a broad view, but most of what you've given us so far is history, accurately,
Yeah.
but history.
What do you want to know?
What I want to know is, let me phrase it as, this is my theory. And
Yes,
then you say you're
Perfect.
wrong or
Perfect.
whatever. First of all, I think Turkey, with all of the prejudices against Muslims
Yeah.
and other things, has done a remarkable job. I guess at least in part due to the transactionalism of Erdogan and maybe the transactionalism of the Turkish people, because they've had so, as you said, historically, they've had so much comings and goings with all of the cultures of the Middle East and Europe and
yeah,
Christianity and so on, that so far they're doing a great job, and Erdogan is doing a great job. In the sense that he hasn't gotten into war, with a few exceptions, like the Kurds. He hasn't stomped down on everybody. Like a lot of, I mean, I consider him a quasi-dictator, at least,
but he's not using that to constantly press down on his people. Again, with the exception of other things. So he looks like a better version of Donald Trump, who is.
Well, that wouldn't be too hard.
Who is,
You know,
yeah, that's
a lot
right,
of people
who is
better.
stupid in addition to
Putin's
being
a better
transactional.
version of Donald Trump.
But-
Kim Jong-un is a
but-
better version.
Now, what do you say to that? I mean,
Okay.
after 100 years of their
Oh,
coming
hold
and
on.
going.
Yeah,
we're-
We got the boss.
I'm time, I have to call time. What I would like to suggest is there's food out in the, out by the bio wall, and I would suggest, let's go out, let's get some food, and let's continue this.
All right, can I give it just the quickest of all possible responses?
Mhm.
You're not wrong. Remember, the purpose of today's exercise is a part of the analysis of where Turkey has been for 100 years, with the expectation of what's gonna look forward to. Here's the bottom line of what I think. One sentence.
Okay.
All right, what Tayyip Erdogan did regarding the development of democratic institutions in Turkey, illiberal that they may be, has made Turkey a legitimate democracy for the first time in history. Now, his intention was maybe to become sultan and discontinue election. That may well have been his intent. He wasn't able to do that. Now, he hasn't got a parliamentary majority, so he has to build a coalition with another party. That's the first time in his history. It has animated the opposition. The opposition really behaved like an opposition in this last election. All right. Erdogan legitimately, I don't question it, holds 52% of the Turkish electorate. I don't dispute that at all. That's the number he's hit time after time after time in elections. However, the opposition has a strong 48, and that's even with a pretty weak candidate going in. So what do I see forward in the future? A genuine democracy breaking out. A genuine, Turkey now has about the 15th or 16th largest economy in the world. That's part of the history here, Elliot. It comes from zero
Did you say
to the
15th or 16th?
15th or 16th GDP. in the
Yeah,
world.
okay, I just.
Okay, you can go on and on and on with these facts, but the point is, I think Turkey will be a legit democracy. I think Turkey will be a serious international player in for the next century. And I think it can be a very prosperous one. The most important feature of all that is that it's a democracy now. It's in the hands of the people. It really is. All right. So we'll see how they are. Could they end up with bad outcomes? Hell yes. In a democracy, that does happen, doesn't it? All right. But will they? It's up to them. That's the point. It never has been up to them before, not for millennia. Okay. Let's eat. And I'm happy to do that.
Here.
Okay.
That's
My book is about that.
back part of you know, you talk to people.
Yes.
Yeah.
I used to walk on.
Anytime.
State Department.
Prefer.
That must have been Europe.
I don't take care of as long as they stay out of this. Yeah.
Sorry for one place that happened.